Hello and welcome to Gin with Gwynne. I'm Oliver Gwynne, and this is where I give you my off-the-cuff and unrehearsed thoughts on marketing data and philosophy. This week, talking about echo chambers. So my good friend and co-worker Emric asked me to talk a little bit more about what I covered very briefly in my last video about echo chambers and how they're not really a thing. Spoiler alert for this video. Thanks to everybody who comments and messages me. Quite a few people asked me to talk about this show, Adolescence. I've not seen it. It doesn't look very funny. I kind of like to watch funny things in my spare time. I don't want to be depressed, so probably not going to watch that. But thank you for asking me on my thoughts on that. So echo chambers, it's the idea that if I am left-leaning in my politics, I will engage and follow more things that are left-leaning. They will echo back to me the thoughts that I already have. I will get more entrenched in my thinking. It will be harder to then challenge those beliefs. And the worry is that over time, this will mean that society gets more divided and we will have greater clashes of culture. In 2022, half of Americans thought that there would be a civil war in the next couple of years because it seemed that everything was so divided. And hey, there's still time, guys. You can do it. So when we think about echo chambers, obviously this is not a new idea that's new to the internet particularly. It's something that has always been rooted in society and where we come from and the things that shape our ideas. And it always comes back to desires. So René Girard had this idea that human desires are not innate, but they are imitated from others, a concept that he called memetic desire. His quote is that man is a creature who does not know what to desire, and he turns to others in order to make up his mind. And our tendency to sort of mirror the desires and beliefs of those around us can create these sort of self-reinforcing communities, even before digital algorithms came into place. And that is sort of the fundamentals of echo chambers. I think there's some truth to that, and there's some things that I don't really agree with. So I do believe that there is an evolutionary side to what we desire in terms of the basic desires of, food, shelter, to propagate further, all of those kind of things, companionship, belonging. Those are all sort of innate to people as animals, basically. But certainly it's hard to ignore the fact that, Instagrams, you see so many trends happening and people follow those trends because they suddenly find that this thing is desirable and they suddenly realize that, hey, this is interesting. So I do think it's true to a certain point. And obviously the social genesis of sort of echo chambers is within our own families, within our own local communities where you're brought up, has a huge impact on your outline on life. So shared values and beliefs within families and friend groups are probably the most important things in shaping people. It's still a huge problem today where people's number one source of financial advice is not financial advisors. It's not the internet, thank God, although that is a problem. It is still their family. And if your family are not good at managing money, if they don't understand investments and inflation and all this kind of things, then you are likely to be poor at managing money as well. Plato had an allegory of the cave. So he had this sort of theory that if you are a caveman and you're living in a cave and all you know is cave drawings, then to you, sort of shadow puppets on a wall become reality. They become real. They become a real sort of story that is true to you because that's all that you really know. That people who have confines of a limited understanding of reality or will perceive sort of shadows as the entirety of their existence. Almost it's sort of a metaphor for insularity of echo chambers. And I guess it's similar to how people worry that tight-knit social groups may accept shared beliefs without question, reinforcing sort of the echo chamber effect. And obviously the worry is that algorithms will amplify this to an extreme. So they are going to present back to you the things that you like and engage with, and they are going to amplify your own thoughts on this. Stephen Hawking, yes, that one, had a quote, which is, "The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge." And isn't that true? Isn't knowing a little bit about something like me dangerous? Because if you take advice from me, which is always a bad thing to do, you're not getting somebody who knows philosophy inside and out and knows it for 10 years and knows all of these things inside and out and has studied this his entire life. You're getting really top level knowledge applied to different things over time. There's a great video on this called "The Internet is Worse Than Ever" that I will link below, but it basically says that algorithms, by prioritizing engagement, they inadvertently promote sensationalism and polarizing content. and that exacerbates the echo chamber phenomenon. God, that's a difficult word today. I should stop putting in words that are difficult. Phenomenon. Phenomenon? Peter Thornburg, in his paper, How Digital Media Drive Effective Polarization Through Partisan Sorting, expands on this from 2022. His quote is, "In media literature, the fundamental mechanism for explaining the impact of new media technology on politics has been selective exposure captured in notion, such as echo chambers or filter bubbles. Media technologies are said to polarize by allowing us to isolate ourselves within like-minded others, thus avoiding the discomfort of being exposed to views and ideas from other groups." So this is the worry, that we're only engaging with people who agree with our thoughts and that there is not much discourse online. And I think that is a worry that I have, that people do seem to be more entrenched. They seem to want to have a little dopamine effect from having an argument with somebody. And so there's not necessarily a good discourse happening with most people. It is just people saying, "You're wrong," and somebody going, "No, you're wrong." And there's no middle ground or anticipation of this. It's just people telling each other that they're stupid and wrong. And sometimes I believe it's important to tell people that they're stupid. Generally, I know that sounds like a really harsh thing to say, but I think it's really important to challenge people's views, always with niceness and patience and understanding, and trying to understand empirically where they're coming from. But we shouldn't just accept that, hey, that's your viewpoint and I have to respect your opinion, because opinions can be formed from nothing, really, from one-offs and bad experiences. We're all elephants in the circus. They get chained to a metal fence when they're young, in the 1920s this is, and the young elephant tries as much as it can to escape the fence and it can't. So when the elephant is fully grown, they can tie it to like a piece of wood and it won't even try and escape, because it's so entrenched in the elephant that it can't escape. And people are like this. We have bad experiences and it completely blinkers our thoughts and opinions on things. It's really difficult to disentangle those things. However, the good news is that this hypothesis has become increasingly questioned, as there's been a couple of fundamental assumptions about the mechanism. So the first is that the results from a couple of different studies have shown that digital media is in fact categorized by substantial interactions across partisan lines. So it's not a case that you're just seeing left media. You are typically, although you might see what you're following, the algorithm these days, as I said recently, it's not really showing you just who you follow. It's giving you smaller content. It's trying to serve you up a wider range of things to keep you on there for a longer period of time. So it's not just showing you what you like. It's trying to serve you a wider range of things. It's more likely to try and show you something in opposition to what you like, to challenge those beliefs, so you engage with that content and say, no, this is wrong. So it's not necessarily true that you're just going to see left-sided content if that's what you are interested in. And also there is some opposition that opposing views will not necessarily shown to reduce polarization. That's not really true. It's been proven that, in fact, those are shown because it creates that sort of feedback loop, and engagement that is what they want. In his 2019 paper, Filter Bubble, Alex Bruns said that while further research should be confirmed these results for a greater number of national contexts and broader range of search engines and news portals, at least for search, it seems that the filter bubble idea has deflated. Far from the vision or threat of an individually unique daily me personalization, in general and news-specific search results still appears to be exceptionally limited. We all know this. The idea that personalization is happening is not really true. We all get stuff on YouTube that's completely irrelevant to us, that we've seen before, that you think, why on earth are you sending me this? That happens all the time. I'm sure we've all had that. It's very difficult to make an algorithm that will personalize everything for every person. And when you're dealing with a million people, it's nearly impossible. So I think we kind of know that to be empirically true. So there's a public concern that obviously there's a growing anxiety that echo chambers will polarize people and individuals are increasingly siloed to these groups. Hannah Arendt's perspective, that she warned that the dangers when individuals lose the ability to distinguish between fact and fiction, that situation can be really exacerbated by echo chambers. She said the ideal subject of totalitarianization rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction no longer exists. And that's really true. I'm sure we've all seen these videos where it's like the globe and it says, hey, it's just a small town in Sheffield. And then when it zooms in, it's like a lovely beach and all this kind of stuff. And it's just people winding each other up on the internet at this point, which I love to a point. But there's so many lies on there. It's really going to become difficult with AI and fake people and deep fakes and all that kind of stuff to distinguish truth from fact. And most people are not willing to go, what's the source on that? And how many people were asked about this and all of this kind of stuff to determine what is true, because what is true is incredibly grey and complicated most of the time. And the trusted news sites that we've all relied on, their funding is going down because advertising is becoming harder, because the people who are getting the advertising funds are the sensationalists at this moment. And so there is definitely a danger in which sources do you follow and which sources do you believe will become incredibly blurry. And in this case, the sources that you follow that are societal and they're in the groups and they're aligned with you, you might believe them all. That is certainly a danger. But we go back to Socrates and his infinite wisdom. He said that emphasizing the importance of self-awareness and critical thinking is perhaps the best weapon against echo chambers, against indoctrination, which maybe is what about adolescence is about. So I've talked about that now. He said the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. A little bit of knowledge, as we said earlier, is dangerous. The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing. And he encouraged individuals to seek out diverse perspectives on everything. And that's so true. You should always try and cast your net as wide as possible, get diverse opinions if you can about things that are important to you. I'm always interested in the opinions of people whose I don't necessarily going to follow their advice. And I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, that I would go and get an opinion from somebody who I'm not going to follow. But for an example, I was recently had Builder over to my flat to do a bit of work and stuff, and I was chatting to him away, and we were talking about politics and stuff. And no offense to this Builder, but I'm not going to be following his advice or his thoughts on politics, but I was still very interested to hear it and how it conflicted against mine. And I sort of said, oh, this is what I'm thinking. And I was interested to see what his point of view was and all this kind of thing. And even though I might factor that into my thinking, it's not going to sway me necessarily. I think too often we are guilty of surrounding ourselves with people who are similar to ourselves, and we don't necessarily engage with the person who says no, or I don't agree with that, or this is the wrong thing to do. Because that message is always difficult and it's not always delivered the nicest possible way. And so I think if we are worried about echo chambers, one is maybe the algorithm isn't the enemy that we think it is. A lot of studies seem to be suggesting that it's not, and more studies need to be done on that. So maybe we don't need to worry so much. But certainly the only way we can do that with our own selves is to challenge our own beliefs, challenge the sources that we engage with and the reasons behind this. And always ask the question, why would somebody think this? Where has this come from? Because the reason is like an elephant. Often they've had a bad experience that has formed a very strong opinion on things. And we also need to be a little bit more forgiving that people's opinions can change over time. You can say one thing one year and then maybe a few years later you have a different point of view. And that's okay. And we seem to be weirdly like, hey, you said this one thing and now you've got to stick with it, especially with politicians and public figures, which I find incredibly odd. So those are my thoughts on echo chambers. Maybe they're not as big a problem as we think they are, as long as we challenge our own thinking, we seek diverse opinions, and we always remember the fact that true wisdom is in knowing that we don't really know anything. Thanks very much. And if you want me to talk about something, let me know. I'll talk about whatever you want.